They told my daughter Lily she had no business singing. And they didn't soften the blow with smiles or kind words. They said it like it was a fact, like a warning stamped into her skin. Don't embarrass us. The words echoed in her head as she stood under the harsh glow of the auditorium lights, knees locked tight, breath coming in shallow, nervous gasps. Her small hands trembled at her sides, and I could see it in her eyes. She was desperately scanning the sea of faces, searching for an escape, a crack in the crowd where she could slip away unnoticed. But the announcer had just called her name, and now every heartbeat of silence pressed heavy against the room, like the whole world was collectively holding its breath, waiting to see if she would crumble. And I recognized that kind of silence. Years ago, when I was just Sarah Turner, a small-town girl with dreams I let die before they ever had a chance to breathe, I stood in a place just like that. Back then, I let other people's doubts swallow me whole. I chose the safe road. I let fear win. I swore to myself I wouldn't let that happen to my daughter, not this time. So I stood heart-pounding louder than the murmurs in the audience, stepped forward to the edge of the curtain, and gently reached for Lily's hand. Her fingers were ice cold. She looked at me like a deer cornered in the headlights of a semi-truck. I didn't have a grand speech ready, just a whisper that carried all the belief I had left in me. Go on, baby. She blinked back at me, the weight of the moment sitting heavy on her shoulders, and then gave the smallest nod like someone stepping off the ledge into the unknown. She moved toward the microphone slowly each step, an act of defiance against the fear gripping her. Her back was rigid, shoulders pulled up like she was bracing for a storm, her voice still locked behind a barricade of doubt. The opening chords of the backing track filled the room, soft, hesitant like her. She leaned toward the mic, lips parting, ready to let the first note slip free. But before a single sound escaped her throat, the unexpected happened. From somewhere in the audience, a woman shot up from her chair, her voice slicing through the stillness. "Hold on, that's my song!" she shouted loud enough to make the judges lean forward, eyebrows raised in confusion. Gasps rippled through the crowd, like waves crashing on a quiet shore. My stomach sank to the floor, my heart skipped a beat, and my breath caught in my throat. But what unfolded next, well, I'll carry that moment with me forever. Because in that instant, Lily did something none of us, not even me, ever expected her to do. And before I go on, if you're still here, if this story stirs something in you, maybe a memory of a time when you stood at your own crossroads or someone you love is standing at theirs, I'd love for you to support stories like ours by liking this video and subscribing to the channel. It helps more than you know, and it means these kinds of voices, these quiet but powerful moments, have a place to be heard. Now back to Lily. Lily Harper is 13 years old, with a face still holding traces of childhood softness, but eyes that hinted at an ocean of dreams she barely dared to touch. She was my daughter. And this is the story of the night she stopped letting the world script her silence and finally tentatively began to listen to the fragile but fierce voice inside her own heart. But before that night, before the stage, the suffocating spotlight, the crowd that seemed to stretch out like an endless sea of strangers, it was just the two of us against the world, Lily and me. Our small, slightly worn two-bedroom rental, tucked at the edge of a nowhere town called Maplewood, where the fences peeled and the grass fought a losing battle with the dirt. Our kingdom was humble, a thrifted keyboard I'd salvaged from the corner of a second-hand shop for $20 a kitchen that doubled as a music studio, and a mother and daughter bound together by long work hours and even longer evenings filled with quiet dreams. By day, Sarah Harper answered phones and scheduled root canals at Dr. Manning's dental care. By night, I pushed a mop across polished floors in downtown office buildings, breathing in lemon-scented emptiness and fluorescent loneliness. It wasn't glamorous, not even close, but it was steady, and steady meant survival in our world. Lily understood that in a way, most kids her age didn't. Maybe that's why she rarely asked for much. She carried herself like she knew how delicate our life was, as if she feared one wrong step would send the whole house of cards collapsing. She had always been quiet, not the kind of quiet that came from timidity, but the inward kind, the kind that hid stories no one had yet heard, the kind that built cathedrals inside notebooks and sketchpads. Her shelves overflowed with tattered paperbacks about people who dared the impossible, while her sketchbooks bloomed with drawings of girls with wings. girls singing into imagined skies, girls who kept their eyes closed while letting their hearts spill wide open. And she sang, but only to the four walls of her tiny room, only when she thought the world, and more importantly, I wasn't listening. The first time I heard her voice, I had just staggered home after a double shift, my feet aching, my body weighed down by exhaustion, and the dull ache of bills waiting on the counter. I stood outside her door, hand lifted to knock, ready to remind her to get some sleep. But then, I heard it. It wasn't bold. It wasn't perfect. It was something else entirely. A hush of a melody, unsure and trembling, slipping into the night, like a secret afraid of its own power. But that sound, soft as it was, stopped me cold. There was something in her voice, an ache wrapped in honesty, raw and unguarded, that made my chest twist into knots. I pressed my hand against the wall and listened, letting the quiet pierce me deeper than any song on the radio ever had. I didn't make a sound. I didn't knock. I just stood there in the dark hallway, eyes burning, until the last note faded into silence. Then I retreated to my room, lay face down on my pillow, and wept for reasons I couldn't fully name. Maybe it was because I realized in that moment my daughter had something rare, not just talent but soul, and I feared what the world might do to that. In our family, music was a parlor trick, at best a sweet hobby for church recitals or polite gatherings, a real path that was for someone else's daughter. My sister Diane Turner. Oh, she was the perfect one. Married to a lawyer, big house in the suburbs, 3 polished kids with straight teeth and private school uniforms. Diane was structure incarnate, practical down to her manicure, and sharp as glass. She measured success in square footage and report cards and had little patience for what she called artsy nonsense. My parents weren't much different. They adored Lily, of course, in the abstract way grandparents do. But they came from a world where girls with dreams were quietly steered toward safe jobs and silent lives. They wanted her to be a nurse, a teacher, something respectable, something that paid the bills. When once, after a rare flush of courage, I hinted that maybe Lily's voice might be enough to take her somewhere bigger. My father, Frank Turner, had chuckled, his voice rough as gravel. What he'd said between bites of meatloaf, "You mean like American Idol?" "Come on, Sarah, be serious." The way he said it made me bite my tongue so hard I tasted copper. I never brought it up again. Then one rainy Saturday morning I saw it. A flyer taped to the fogged-up window of the Piggly Wiggly, bright yellow and impossible to ignore. Tri-County Youth Talent Showcase, ages 10 to 17. Singers, dancers, poets, dreamers welcome. I stood there staring at it until the clerk asked if I needed help. My hand trembled as I snapped a photo of the flyer, my heart wrestling itself into knots. What was I thinking? Part of me didn't even want to show it to her. What if I handed her hope and the world crushed it under its heel? What if the rejection broke her? But fear didn't win that day. I sat Lily down after dinner, heart in my throat, and showed her the picture on my phone. For a heartbeat, her face was unreadable, and then her whole body shifted, lit up like someone had turned on a switch inside her. Her lips parted in disbelief, as though afraid even to hope. "Could I really try?" she asked, her voice so small it nearly undid me. I smiled, brushing a stray curl from her face. "Yeah, baby girl, you can try." She disappeared into her room that night, and for the first time I heard her sing without holding back. Her voice, once hidden behind locked doors and guarded walls, floated through our old house, a little louder, a little braver, and it was beautiful in a way that hurt to hear. Every night after that, she practiced the same song, scribbling it line by line in her notebook, rehearsing in the shower, humming through her math homework, whispering melodies into the night when she thought I was asleep. But of course, not everyone shared our quiet joy. The night before the audition, we had dinner with my parents and Diane's family. I hadn't planned to mention the showcase, but Lily couldn't help herself. She glowed like a lantern at the table, excitement too big to contain. "I'm singing tomorrow," she said softly as she passed the mashed potatoes. "Downtown. Youth Showcase." You could have heard a pin drop. Diane's fork clattered onto her plate. My mother's lips thinned into a line. My father sighed, the kind of sigh that filled a room like smoke. Diane leaned back in her chair, folding her napkin with surgical precision. Sing in public, Lily. That's sweet honey, but maybe stick to church performances. My father shook his head, barely masking his disdain. Focus on your grades. Music's not going to put food on the table. And just like that, the light flickered in her eyes. I saw it, the slow dimming, the way her shoulders curled inward, her voice retreating back inside the shell where it had lived for so long. The ride home was thick with silence. I asked if she was nervous. She said no, but I knew better. She was unraveling inside. I recognized the feeling, that gnawing ache when you start believing the voices that tell you you're not enough. But I wouldn't let them steal this from her. I couldn't. I saw it in her. I heard it. And if the rest of the world was too blind to see it, well, that was their loss. Because in less than 24 hours, Lily Harper was going to step onto that stage, and everything she thought she was or wasn't was about to be put to the ultimate test. The morning of the showcase arrived not with fanfare, but with a suffocating hush that settled over our small kitchen like a fog neither of us dared to break. Lily sat at the table, her usual thoughtful quietness transformed into something heavier, something that pressed against her like invisible armor. She toyed with her eggs, nudging them aimlessly across the plate, her gaze fixed on the window as though she might find an escape route in the patchy gray sky beyond. She still wore her pajama shirt crumpled and faded, as if changing out of it might somehow force her to face the day ahead. We were supposed to leave in an hour, yet she moved as though she were frozen in place, her body heavy with dread. I tried, Lord. I tried to lighten the air between us, filling the silence with soft words and memories of how her voice had filled the house last night, how proud I was that she'd stuck with the song, how brave I thought she was for even daring to stand in the face of a crowd. She nodded, offered me a faint mechanical smile, but it was hollow, a ghost of a smile that never made it past her lips, let alone to her heart. When I asked if she wanted to run through a few warm-up scales before we left, she shook her head, her voice thin and distant, like she was already slipping away from me. It doesn't matter, she whispered. Her words struck me like a blade to the ribs. I forced myself to swallow down the lump rising in my throat. Of course it matters, I said, my voice firmer than I felt. You've poured everything into this, Lily. Don't let them take that from you. She turned to me, then finally meeting my eyes, and I saw it. Her defenses cracking her eyes, brimming with tears, she refused to let fall. But what if they're right? She whispered, her voice quivering. What if I get up there and freeze? What if I sound awful and they laugh? There was no magic answer, no perfect reassurance that could banish the fear nesting inside her. I knew that too well, because I had lived with that same fear for most of my life, so I did the only thing I could. I wrapped her in my arms, holding her close, and whispered, "Then you freeze, and I'll be there to catch you, but Lily, I don't think you will." As we prepared to leave, I watched her struggle with her buttons, her trembling fingers fumbling as though they no longer belonged to her. She glanced at her reflection in the mirror, her expression unreadable, as though the girl staring back was someone she didn't recognize, someone wearing bravery like an ill-fitting costume. When I asked if she wanted to bring her lyrics notebook, she shook her head once more, tucking her hands deep into the sleeves of her hoodie, as if trying to disappear inside it. "I have them memorized," she murmured. The drive to the community center stretched on endlessly, the silence inside the car roaring louder than the steady hum of traffic outside. From the corner of my eye, I watched her slump deeper into the seat, headphones tucked over her ears, though I could tell no music was playing. She wasn't merely nervous, she was unraveling thread by fragile thread. I understood why. It wasn't just the stage or the spotlight, it was the dinner, the suffocating stares, the way Diane had looked at her like she was a stain on the family linen, the sharp slice of my father's sigh, and most of all the poisonous words, "You'll embarrass us," that had embedded themselves in her, like shards of glass playing over and over in her head, a cruel refrain she couldn't silence. She didn't say it aloud, but I felt it radiating from her like static electricity. She was starting to believe them. When we arrived, the lobby was alive with energy, the air thick with the sound of voices warming up, kids rehearsing lines and pacing the floor, their sequined outfits shimmering under the harsh fluorescent lights. They laughed with friends, their confidence practically dripping off their skin. I glanced at Lily sitting small and quiet in her faded jeans and pale pink hoodie, a tiny island of stillness in the sea of sparkle and bravado. She had no glitter, no stage makeup, just that thin, fragile thread of hope left clinging to her. We checked in the volunteer, pinning her number 47 onto her hoodie like a badge of survival. We found an empty bench at the farthest corner of the room, as if we could make ourselves invisible. She slouched down, arms wrapped tightly around herself, head bent low, her posture screaming that she wanted nothing more than to melt into the floor. Nearby, a girl with a mane of wild curls and a Broadway-worthy voice practiced scales, hitting notes so high they sliced through the chatter like glass. Lily watched her for only a few seconds before looking away, her expression closing like a shutter. I leaned in close, speaking softly, not wanting to spook her. "She's not you, Lily. You're not supposed to sound like anyone else." She gave me the tiniest nod, barely perceptible, and didn't say a word. Then right before they called her backstage, her phone buzzed. A message from Diane. I caught enough of it over her shoulder to make my blood boil. "Break a leg. Just don't overdo it. No need to show off." Lily didn't reply. She locked the screen, handed me the phone, and walked off toward the waiting area without a word. I opened my mouth, searching for something, anything that might stick, but the words clung stubbornly to the back of my throat as she disappeared behind the curtain. I watched her from my seat as she made her way toward the stage entrance, her steps slow and heavy like a prisoner being led to trial. Her back hunched beneath the weight of invisible chains, hands buried deep in her pockets. From my vantage point, I could see the pale side of her face peeking through the curtain. Her eyes closed tight, lips moving slowly as if praying or maybe just breathing. I couldn't tell. The announcer's voice rang out over the loudspeakers, clear and rehearsed. Lily Harper, age 13, performing an original ballad titled "Still Rising." A hush fell over the room, and she didn't move. The silence stretched thin, then thinner, until it felt like the entire room was holding its breath. Whispers rippled through the audience like restless waves. The judges leaned in, exchanging uneasy glances. One of the backstage coordinators motioned to her, trying to coax her forward. Still nothing. My heart clenched. I stood up, walked swiftly to the edge of the curtain, and reached for her hand. She flinched at my touch, startled, her eyes wide, and panicked as if she'd already failed and was bracing for the fall. I didn't try to convince her. I didn't lecture or plead. I just squeezed her hand and whispered the only words that mattered. "Go on." She nodded. Not because the fear was gone, but because for a sliver of a moment she believed she could walk through it anyway. And when she finally stepped out from behind that curtain, I stopped breathing altogether. The announcer repeated her name softer this time, as though unsure she would appear. But she was there. One small girl in a faded hoodie and scuffed sneakers, standing alone on a stage built for giants. The spotlight washed over her, and she winced, almost shrinking beneath its glare. But she didn't stop. She moved forward step by trembling step until she reached the microphone. It towered over her. She adjusted it with trembling fingers, each motion, deliberate, careful, like the mic might shatter if she breathed too hard. She scanned the crowd, hundreds of strangers, some leaning in, curious others scrolling absently through their phones, waiting for something, anything, to make them care. I could see the doubt clawing at her, the terror written across her face like a plea. She gripped the microphone's base as though it were a lifeline, the only thing keeping her from being swept away. Her chest rose and fell shallow and quick, but still she stood. And then, at the very edge of crumbling, she looked at me. From beneath the suffocating glare of the stage lights, from behind the fortress of fear she'd built around herself all morning, Lily Harper found me standing just off stage, hiding in the shadows of the wings, where I could still see every trembling breath, every flicker of doubt, dancing across her face. She didn't smile. This wasn't the time for that, not yet. She didn't cry either, though I knew tears lurked somewhere just beneath the surface. Instead, she blinked slowly, like someone trying to summon a memory, clinging to something fragile, something tethered to me. I gave her a nod, nothing grand, nothing dramatic, just the kind of quiet, steady nod a mother gives when words are no longer enough but faith remains. The soft swell of piano keys seeped into the silence, filling the cavernous space with the tender chords I'd heard floating through her bedroom door night after night. The same melody she had written in fragments, humming into her phone beneath her blankets, scribbling lyrics into the corners of sketchbooks she guarded like sacred texts. Still rising, her song, her truth. The intro faded, and the moment arrived, the one she had feared rehearsed, doubted, dared. She opened her mouth, and for an agonizing second, nothing came. My stomach clenched into a fist. I wanted to climb onto that stage, gather her in my arms, and tell them all to leave to go home if they couldn't see the bravery it took, just for her to stand there. But then, like a fragile seed breaking through frozen soil, her voice emerged soft, trembling but achingly real. The first line drifted into the room, tentative as a whisper in the dark. I was told to sit down, to be still, to be small. A few heads turned, curiosity flickering. The second line came a little stronger, gathering courage with each syllable. I've been broken and bent, but I've never let myself fall. And something inside her began to shift. I saw it, the subtle lift of her shoulders, the unclenching of her fists. She raised her gaze, no longer staring at the floor, but daring to look out beyond the crowd, beyond the fear, as if realizing the song wasn't just something she was singing, it was something she was surviving. Each word grew surer, not loud, not showy, but honest in a way that demanded the room listen. It wasn't polished perfection, it was something rarer, raw, unfiltered truth. And that truth swept over the auditorium like a current, pulling everyone toward her. And then, halfway through the song, right before the chorus that lived like a battle cry in her chest, the unexpected happened. A woman in the third row stood abruptly tall and striking, with dark curls tied back in a crimson scarf. She looked stunned, as if she'd seen a ghost. She lifted her hand, not with anger, but with an urgency that sliced through the silence. Wait, that's my song. The world froze. The music cut out. Lily stumbled into silence, her face draining of color. The judges leaned in, the crowd erupted into whispers, a collective gasp rippling from the back of the room like wind through brittle leaves. The woman, elegant, certain, stepped forward toward the judges' table. All eyes followed her as she whispered something to the panel. They exchanged glances, confusion giving way to recognition, then motioned her toward the mic at the side of the stage. She looked directly at Lily. "I'm Vanessa Quinn," she announced, her voice steady, but tinged with disbelief. "I wrote that song 3 years ago, posted it online. Never really thought it went anywhere. Honestly, I didn't think anyone even heard it." She paused, her gaze softening. "But hearing you sing it like that, like you lived it, I've never heard it sound so alive." Lily stood, frozen lips parted, the words stolen from her throat. Vanessa smiled gently, not as a critic, but as a fellow artist. "Keep singing," she said. Lily glanced at the judges, at the sea of faces, then at me. I nodded once more, all the words I couldn't say pressed into that small gesture. She turned back to the mic, inhaled deeply, and picked up where she'd left off. This time the words spilled from her like a rising tide, stronger, freer, her voice lifting with each line. By the time she reached the chorus, "I'm still rising, even if you don't see me yet," the room transformed. The murmuring stopped. Phones were lowered. Every heart, every eye was on her. The girl they had dismissed moments ago now held them in the palm of her hand, and they followed her every note as if she were leading them somewhere sacred. And when the final note drifted into the stillness, no one moved. Not the judges, not the audience. The air hung heavy with something close to reverence. She stood at the microphone chest, heaving cheeks, flushed eyes, wide with disbelief that she had made it to the other side. I saw it in her expression, the lingering fear that someone, anyone, would step forward and tell her it didn't count, that it wasn't enough. But no one did. Vanessa Quinn rose from behind the judges' table, tears shimmering in her eyes. She walked to the edge of the stage, looking up at Lily as if she were beholding something holy. "That was the most honest version of my song I have ever heard," she said softly. "You took it out of my hands and made it yours." The other two judges nodded, visibly moved. One, a silver-haired man with thick glasses, whispered something to the coordinator. Then, as if on cue, all three stood together. The audience followed, not with polite applause, but with an eruption of raw, unscripted emotion, a standing ovation that shook the floor. People cheered, some wiped tears from their cheeks. Even the kids in the back row stared, hands over their mouths, stunned, silent by what they had just witnessed. Lily turned to me just a flicker of a glance, but in it I saw something that hadn't been there before. Belief. She smiled, not the small, careful smile she used to shield herself from the world, but something pure, something finally free. She bowed quickly, then slipped off the stage where I was waiting, arms already open. She said nothing at first. She didn't have to. She collapsed into me, wrapping her arms around my neck, holding on so tightly I could feel the frantic rhythm of her heart against mine. "I did it," she whispered into my ear. "You did," I whispered back, "even after they said you shouldn't, especially after that." She pulled back her face, glowing with the kind of clarity that only comes after walking through fire. I thought I wasn't strong enough," she murmured. "You were," I told her. Then almost shyly, she asked the question still flickering in her eyes. "Do you think?" They meant it. The clapping. I laughed not at her, but at the beautiful absurdity that she still didn't see what she had done. "Lily, I think they felt something they weren't expecting to feel. You reminded them what music is supposed to do." We sat together backstage, her head resting against my shoulder, listening as the next performer took the stage. The applause that followed was polite, scattered. The room was still catching its breath from Lily. A few moments later, Vanessa Quinn found us. She knelt down so she was eye to eye with Lily, her expression stripped bare of any performance. "Can I tell you something?" she asked. Lily nodded wide-eyed. "I was going to quit," Vanessa said, her voice trembling now. "All of it. This judging gig. Music. I haven't written a song in almost a year. I thought it didn't matter anymore. But tonight, hearing you sing, you reminded me why I started in the first place. You woke something up in me." Lily blinked, stunned. "Really?" she whispered. "Really," Vanessa smiled. "And if you ever want help writing, recording, anything, you have my email now." I watched my daughter absorb those words, not fully comprehending them yet, but letting them sink in like seeds planted deep. And for the first time in her life, I saw it in her eyes, not just hope, but the quiet certainty that maybe, just maybe, she belonged on that stage after all. It didn't sink in right away. Lily sat still for a long time after Vanessa left, but it wasn't the brittle, paralyzing stillness that had gripped her before. This stillness was different. It was the kind that settled over you after a storm passes and leaves the air heavy with relief and something unspoken, like the hush that lingers after a lightning strike. She sat there, not moving her breathing, even her hands folded gently in her lap, as if trying to hold on to something she didn't yet understand. On the way home, she replayed the recording someone had sent her, her own voice pouring through the speakers of my aging Corolla, filling the car's small space with something that felt larger than either of us. We sat parked outside our house, the glow of the dashboard casting soft shadows across her face as she listened. And this time, she didn't flinch. She didn't wrinkle her nose or ask to turn it off or say it sounded strange. She just listened, her expression unreadable, her fingers resting lightly on her jeans as if touching the notes in the air. Later that night, after she'd gone to bed, I sat alone in the living room, scrolling absently through my phone when a message popped up from Diane. The words glowed against the screen, halting, uncertain, but undeniably hers. I watched the video. I was wrong. She's something else. Tell her I said so. I read it twice, not because I needed Diane's approval, I didn't, but because I wanted to etch that moment into my memory, the moment when someone who had spent so long dismissing Lily finally had no choice but to admit what I had always known. And all because Lily dared to stand still, to take a breath, and to let the world see the thing she had kept hidden for so long. She hadn't just sung a song, she had shown up, and they, every last one of them, had stood for her. The next morning, expecting to find her sleeping off the exhaustion of the night before I tiptoed into her room. But Lily was already awake, cross-legged on her bed, a tangle of sheets around her, her notebook open in her lap. She was humming softly, her pencil scratching across the page. Not doodles this time, not sketches of winged girls in borrowed dreams, but words versus crossed-out lines, arrows pointing to new stanzas tumbling over the edges of the page like they couldn't wait to get out. I leaned against the doorframe, watching her heart swelling. She looked different. Not in any outward dramatic way, but in the way she sat straighter, more rooted in herself, as if she'd finally realized she belonged in her own skin. Her eyes held a kind of quiet fire now, a flicker of something newly lit inside her that I knew wasn't going to burn out anytime soon. When she noticed me, she smiled and I asked new song. She nodded, grinning with a hint of mischief. It started coming to me last night, she said. You want help? I offered, only half joking. She paused, considered, then smiled wider. Maybe just the chorus. That small invitation meant more to me than she could possibly know. Not just because she was writing again, but because she was letting herself want something, letting herself believe she had the right to create it. Later that day, the organizers posted the showcase videos online, and Lily's performance shaky phone footage, and all started making its rounds. It didn't rack up millions of views, but it didn't have to. It was enough. Comments poured in, strangers calling her brave, honest, inspiring. People shared their own stories of being silenced when they were young, of parents who didn't understand, of teachers who laughed when they dared to speak their dreams aloud. One comment stuck out, lingering like a song you couldn't forget. I cried watching this. Your daughter sang the words I wish I'd had the courage to say when I was 13. Lily read it aloud 3 times, her voice soft but steady. That night, as we sat side by side on the couch watching her video on the big screen, like it was some kind of family movie night, she finally asked the question I had been waiting for. Do you think I could really do this? There was no hesitation in her voice, only a fragile hope, trembling on the edge of belief. I didn't answer with industry stats or glittering promises. I didn't pretend to know how this all worked. I just looked at her and said, yes, because it's in you, Lily. Not just the voice, but the truth. And the world. The world needs more of that. And the world, it seemed, was beginning to open its doors, just a crack. True to her word, Vanessa Quinn emailed us a few days later. She sent a list of open mic night songwriting camps and even a local program where kids could record demo tracks with mentorship. She offered to let Lily shadow her at the studio for a day. Suddenly, the world that once seemed locked behind a wall of impossibility was inching closer step by step. But the shift wasn't just in the world, it was in our family too. Diane showed up a week later, awkward and uncertain, carrying a bag of pastries and an apology wrapped in silence. She didn't say the words out loud, she didn't have to. She handed Lily a leather-bound songwriting journal, brand new, and on the first page in Diane's neat, practiced handwriting, she wrote, "To Lily, keep going." Lily was polite as always. She murmured thank you, and after Diane left, she sat on the floor, flipping through every single page, as if the act itself was sacred. Even my parents called. My mother said, "We saw the video. She really does have something special." My father didn't say much, he never did, but he asked if she was still singing. And that from him was as close to pride as I would ever get. But the biggest change of all was in Lily herself. She no longer sang with the door shut tight, as if afraid someone might overhear her. She sang openly now, not for an audience, not for applause, but because the music had become part of her like breathing. She sang while brushing her hair, while folding laundry, while scribbling in her notebook. Her voice, once caged, had finally been set free, and it wove itself into the rhythm of our everyday life. One evening I walked past her room and found her sitting on the floor phone, propped up, recording herself. Not just singing, but speaking, introducing herself, telling her story. She didn't ask me to leave. She didn't flinch when I paused in the doorway. She just kept going, her voice steady, her story hers to tell. And that's when I realized this wasn't just about one performance, one song, or even one night. This was about something deeper. She had taken all the fear, all the doubt, all the voices that told her she wasn't enough, and she'd built herself a stage out of them. And now she stood on it, and she sang. And no one could take that away from her. There are nights when the memory returns to me as vividly as if it had just unfolded yesterday, the way she stood there, my daughter paralyzed in the blinding glow of the stage lights, nearly consumed by the roar of silence pressing in from every corner of that auditorium. And I remember the look in her eyes, the raw, vulnerable question that lived inside them. Am I allowed to try? It was not spoken aloud, but I heard it as clearly as if she had shouted it into the stillness. And God, I am so thankful I answered yes. Because when the world tells your daughter she can't, when it tries to shrink her into someone safer, quieter, easier to explain away, and you, as her mother, stand beside her and whisper that she can, well, You don't just rewrite the future she believed in, you help her rewrite the world itself. Sometimes in the hush of our quiet evenings, I find myself reflecting on how many other Lilies are out there. Young people standing at the trembling edge of their own dreams, waiting for anyone to tell them it's okay to leap. And so, if you're reading these words, if this story has wrapped itself around you in some way, if you've ever been told to sit down to be smaller, to dim your light, just to make someone else more comfortable, then yes, this story was meant for you too. And if you happen to be a parent, or a teacher, or a mentor, or simply the kind of friend who understands that a single spark of belief can set a life ablaze, remember this. It only takes one moment, one nod, one whispered, "You can." It happened for Lily because someone finally did. And maybe someone in your world is waiting for that same moment. If this story moved something in you, if it reminded you of your own battles or the battles of someone you love, I hope you'll pass it along. Share it, because you never know who might need to hear it today. And I would love to hear from you too. Tell me, what did someone once say you couldn't do, and what did you do anyway? Tell me in the comments. Because stories like these, they deserve to be heard. And if you want more stories like Lily's about courage, about heart, about finding your voice when the world wants you silent, I hope you'll stay with us, subscribe, and keep this conversation going. Thank you for listening.